The roses bled under Elias Carter's careful hands, their petals bruised but defiant. Much like him. He knelt in the dirt of Willow Ridge Castle's sprawling gardens, the only place in upstate New York where he felt truly alive, while laughter sliced through the air like a blade. "Hey, fairy gardener, gonna plant a rainbow next," sneered Preston Whitmore, heir to a tech fortune, his voice dripping with the confidence of someone who'd never known want. Elias didn't flinch. At 27, he'd heard far worse growing up in the small, conservative town of Coldwater, where being openly gay made him a target before he'd even learned to love himself. He wiped sweat from his brow, his lean frame steady under the weight of their scorn, and focused on the roses. They were his sanctuary, each thorn a reminder that beauty could thrive in pain. The Whitmore siblings Preston, Lila, and their cousin Vanessa lounged on the castle's stone terrace, their designer clothes clashing with the untamed greenery Elias had spent years cultivating. Willow Ridge, a 19th-century estate owned by the reclusive billionaire Arthur Langley, was their playground, and Elias was just the help. "You think he cries into his flowers at night?" Lila's voice, sharp and musical, carried over the lawn. Vanessa snickered, tossing her auburn hair. Elias's fingers tightened around his shears. He could walk away, find another job, but Willow Ridge was more than a paycheck. It was home. Arthur, the castle's aging owner, had hired him 3 years ago after catching him sketching garden designs in a public park. "You've got a gift, kid," Arthur had said, his voice gravelly but kind. "This place needs you." Elias hadn't known then how much those words would come to mean. The siblings' taunts faded as Elias's thoughts drifted to Jamie Ruiz, the estate's chef, whose warm smile and quiet strength had been a lifeline these past months. Jamie, with his tousled black hair and hands that could coax magic from flour and spices, had a way of making Elias feel seen. Their late-night talks in the castle's kitchen, stealing bites of fresh-baked empanadas, had sparked something neither dared name yet. But in a place like Willow Ridge, where wealth and status ruled, love felt like a dangerous rebellion. "Elias." Arthur's voice boomed from the castle's arched doorway, startling the group. The old man, frail but commanding in his tailored suit, leaned on his cane. "Come inside. We need to talk." The Whitmores exchanged glances, their mockery pausing. Elias stood, brushing dirt from his jeans, and followed Arthur, ignoring the whispers behind him. The castle's interior was a labyrinth of oak paneling and stained glass, every corner heavy with history. Arthur led him to the library, a room of towering bookshelves and a fireplace that hadn't been lit in years. "Sit," Arthur said, his blue eyes sharp despite his waning strength. Elias obeyed, his heart pounding. Arthur wasn't one for casual chats. "You've been good to this place," Arthur began, his voice softening. "Better than those vultures out there." He gestured toward the terrace, where the Whitmores were no doubt plotting their inheritance. Arthur had no children, and the siblings, his distant relatives, had circled for years, assuming Willow Ridge would be theirs. "They think they own the world," Arthur muttered. "But they don't know a damn thing about loyalty." Elias shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I just tend the gardens." "I don't. You do more than that," Arthur interrupted. "You breathe life into this place. And I've made a decision." He paused, coughing into a handkerchief. "I'm changing my will. Willow Ridge, it's yours when I'm gone." The words hit Elias like a freight train. His breath caught, and the room seemed to tilt. "What?" he whispered, certain he'd misheard. Arthur's gaze held steady. "You heard me. The castle, the grounds, The trust, it's all yours. I've watched you, Elias. You're the only one who cares about this place for what it is, not what it's worth. Arthur's voice cracked with emotion. But you can't tell anyone. Not yet. Those kids out there, they'll tear you apart if they know. Elias's mind reeled. Willow Ridge was worth millions, hundreds of millions. The idea of him, a gardener from nowhere, inheriting it was absurd. Yet Arthur's sincerity was undeniable. Why me? Elias asked, his voice barely audible. Because you're family, Arthur said simply. Not by blood, but by heart. My brother, he was like you. Loved men, loved this land. He never got to live his truth. I won't let that happen to you. Elias's throat tightened. He'd never known Arthur's brother, but the weight of those words settled deep. Before he could respond, a knock interrupted. Jamie poked his head in, his dark eyes flickering with concern. Everything okay, Mr. Langley? Elias. Arthur waved him off. Fine, Jamie. Just talking business. But as Jamie left, his gaze lingered on Elias, a silent question passing between them. Elias wanted to tell him everything, to spill the impossible truth, but Arthur's warning echoed. Silence was safety for now. Outside, the Whitmore's laughter had turned to murmurs. Elias caught Preston's eye through the window, and the heir's smirk faltered, sensing something amiss. Elias returned to the gardens, his hands trembling as he pruned. The roses, once his refuge, now felt like a spotlight. He was no longer just the gardener. He was the heir to a castle and a target. As dusk painted the sky in purples and golds, Jamie found him by the fountain. You look like you've seen a ghost, Jamie said, his voice gentle but probing. Elias forced a smile, his heart racing. He wanted to tell Jamie, to trust him, but the weight of Arthur's secret held him back. Just a long day, Elias lied, his fingers brushing Jamie's briefly. The touch sent a spark through him, a reminder of what he stood to lose if the truth came out too soon. The Whitmores were ruthless, and Elias knew they'd stop at nothing to protect their claim. The game had just begun, and he was already in over his head. The castle's kitchen smelled of rosemary and hope, a haven where Elias could breathe again. Jamie moved with quiet grace, his hands kneading dough for tomorrow's banquet, while Elias sat at the counter, nursing a mug of coffee. The Whitmore's annual gala was days away, a lavish affair where they'd parade their wealth and charm to secure their place in Arthur's will. Elias's secret burned in his chest, a ticking bomb he couldn't share, not even with Jamie. You've been off since yesterday, Jamie said, not looking up from his work. His voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, like he knew Elias was hiding something. Talk to me, Eli. Elias's heart stuttered at the nickname. He wanted to spill everything: Arthur's will, the castle, the weight of a future he wasn't sure he could carry. But the Whitmore's voices echoed in his mind, their taunts now laced with suspicion. Earlier, Preston had cornered him by the greenhouse, his eyes cold. What did the old man want with you? He demanded. Elias had mumbled something about garden budgets, but Preston's sneer said he wasn't convinced. I'm fine, Elias said, forcing a grin. Just stressed about the gala. You know how they get. Jamie raised an eyebrow, unconvinced, but didn't push. Instead, he slid a plate of warm cornbread across the counter, a silent offering. Elias took a bite, the buttery sweetness grounding him. Jamie's kindness was a tether, but it also scared him. If the Whitmores learned the truth, would they target Jamie too? The gala preparations consumed Willow Ridge. Caterers swarmed, Florists argued over centerpieces, and the Whitmores barked orders like royalty. Elias worked double shifts, shaping the gardens into a spectacle of color and light. Lila, the sharpest of the siblings, watched him too closely, her designer heels clicking as she inspected his work. "Don't screw this up, gardener," she said, her smile venomous. "We need this place looking perfect for the investors." Elias nodded, his stomach churning. Investors meant the Whitmores were already planning to sell Willow Ridge's land for development condos. Maybe. Or a resort. The thought of his gardens bulldozed for profit made him sick. He glanced at the castle's towers, their stone weathered but proud, and felt a surge of protectiveness. This was his now, Arthur had said. But how could he, a nobody, stand against a family like the Whitmores? That night, unable to sleep, Elias wandered the castle's halls. Moonlight spilled through the windows, casting shadows on portraits of Langley's long gone. He paused at only young man with Arthur's eyes, his expression soft but haunted. Arthur's brother, Elias realized, the one who'd never lived his truth. The weight of that legacy pressed on him, mingling with his own fears. He wasn't just fighting for a castle. He was fighting for a life he'd been too afraid to claim. A creak behind him made him jump. Jamie stood there, his chef's jacket replaced by a worn hoodie, his eyes searching. "Couldn't sleep either?" Jamie asked, stepping closer. The air between them crackled, heavy with unspoken words. Elias wanted to close the distance, to let Jamie's warmth chase away the fear. But the secret held him back. "Jamie," Elias started, his voice low. "If something big happened, something that changed everything, would you stay?" It was the closest he could come to the truth. Jamie's brow furrowed, but he nodded. "I'm not going anywhere, Eli. Whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone." His hand brushed Elias's arm, a fleeting touch that set Elias's heart racing. For a moment, they stood there, the castle's silence wrapping around them like a promise. But a distant laugh, Vanessa's, sharp and cruel, broke the spell. Elias pulled away, his resolve hardening. He couldn't drag Jamie into this yet. The gala arrived in a blur of champagne and string quartets. Elias worked the sidelines, adjusting topiaries while guests in black tie gawked at Willow Ridge's grandeur. The Whitmores shone, Preston charming investors, Lila flirting with media moguls, Vanessa snapping selfies by the fountain. But Arthur, frail and ghostly, stole the show. He took the stage, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Willow Ridge is more than stone," he said. "It's a legacy. And I've chosen who'll carry it forward." The crowd murmured, intrigued. The Whitmores froze, their smiles brittle. Elias, hidden behind a rose trellis, felt his pulse hammer. Arthur's eyes found his, a flicker of reassurance passing between them. The announcement wasn't tonight, but it was coming. And when it did, Elias knew, the Whitmores' mockery would turn to rage. As the night wound down, Jamie found him again, this time with a glass of stolen champagne. To surviving this circus, Jamie toasted, his grin infectious. Elias clinked his glass, their fingers brushing. For a moment, the world was just them two men, one castle, and a future that felt impossibly close. But in the shadows, Preston watched, his eyes narrowing. The game was shifting, and Elias was running out of time to hide. The morning after the gala, Willow Ridge buzzed with tension. Elias woke to whispers among the staff, rumors that Arthur's health was failing faster than anyone knew. The Whitmores were in a frenzy, huddling in the parlor, their voices sharp as they debated who'd get the castle. Elias kept his head down, pruning hedges, but his mind raced. Arthur's secret was a ticking clock, and every glance from Preston felt like a warning shot. By noon, Lila cornered him in the rose garden. "You're awfully quiet lately," she said, her eyes glinting with suspicion. "What's the old man been telling you?" Elias's pulse spiked, but he kept his voice steady. "Just garden stuff," he said, clipping a thorn. Lila's laugh was cold. "Don't play dumb, Elias. You're not as invisible as you think." She sauntered off, leaving him shaken. They were circling, and he was the prey. That afternoon, Elias sought refuge in the castle's attic, a dusty maze of trunks and forgotten relics. He needed to think, to plan. Among the cobwebs, he found a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed. It was Arthur's brother's, filled with sketches of gardens and notes about love he'd never expressed. One entry read, "I hide who I am to keep this place. But it's killing me." Elias's chest ached. He understood that fear the cost of being himself in a world that mocked him for it. Jamie found him there, his presence like sunlight breaking through clouds. "You're hiding," Jamie said, not accusing, just knowing. Elias clutched the journal, his resolve cracking. "I'm scared," he admitted, the words spilling out. "Something's coming, Jamie, and it's bigger than me." Jamie sat beside him, their shoulders touching. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together," he said. "But you've got to let me in." Elias wanted to God. He wanted to, but the journal in his hands felt like a warning. Instead, he leaned into Jamie, their lips meeting in a kiss that was equal parts desperation and hope. It was their first, stolen in the attic shadows, and it tasted like freedom. But the moment was fleeting. A crash downstairs jolted them apart, glass breaking, voices shouting. They rushed down to find Preston in the library, a shattered vase at his feet, his face red with fury. "He's dying, and he's playing games." Preston yelled at Vanessa, who looked pale. "I heard him on the phone with his lawyer. He's changing the will." Elias froze, his blood cold. Jamie's hand grazed his, a silent anchor, but Preston's eyes locked onto him. "You," he spat. "What do you know?" "Nothing," Elias said, too quickly. Preston stepped closer, his height intimidating. "Don't lie to me, Gardner. You're in on this, aren't you?" Before Elias could respond, Arthur appeared, leaning heavily on his cane. "Enough," he barked. "Preston, back off." The room fell silent, but the tension was electric. Arthur's eyes met Elias's, a silent plea to stay strong. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He wandered the gardens, the moonlight casting long shadows. Jamie joined him, their hands entwined. "You're not alone," Jamie whispered, and Elias almost told him everything. But then he saw Vanessa watching from a window, her silhouette sharp against the glass. The Whitmores were closing in, and Elias knew they'd do anything to keep Willow Ridge. He had to protect Jamie, protect the castle, protect himself. But how? The next day, Arthur called him to the study. "It's time," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm announcing the will tomorrow. Be ready." Elias's stomach dropped. Tomorrow, the world would know he was the heir. Tomorrow, the mockery would turn to war. He left the study, his heart pounding, and found Jamie waiting. "Whatever happens," Jamie said, "I'm with you." Elias nodded, but fear gnawed at him. The Whitmores weren't just cruel, they were dangerous. And Elias was about to step into the lion's den. Dawn broke over Willow Ridge, the sky a bruise of gray and gold. Elias stood in the gardens, his hands deep in the soil, grounding himself before the storm. Today, Arthur would announce the will, and Elias's life would change forever. The Whitmores were already scheming Preston's glares, Lila's whispered phone calls, Vanessa's fake tears at breakfast. They knew something was coming, and Elias felt their eyes on him like knives. Jamie found him by the fountain, his chef's apron swapped for a flannel shirt. "You're shaking," Jamie said, his voice low. Elias wanted to tell him everything, to unburden his heart, but the words stuck. Instead, he pulled Jamie close, their foreheads touching. "Just stay with me today?" Elias whispered. Jamie nodded, his hand squeezing Elias's. It was a promise, but Elias couldn't shake the fear that he was putting Jamie in danger. The announcement was set for noon in the Grand Hall, a cavernous room of chandeliers and ancestral portraits. Guests arrived: lawyers, local dignitaries, the Whitmores' allies, all buzzing with anticipation. Elias stood at the back, his work boots out of place among polished loafers. Jamie stayed close, his presence a shield. The Whitmores sat up front, their faces masks of confidence. But Elias saw the cracks: Preston's clenched jaw, Lila's fidgeting hands. Arthur took the stage, his frailty stark under the lights. "Willow Ridge is my life's work," he began, his voice steady despite his cough. "And I've chosen who'll carry it forward." The room hushed. Preston leaned forward, expectant. Arthur's eyes found Elias. "Elias Carter," he said, "will inherit Willow Ridge Castle and its estate." The room erupted. Preston shot to his feet, his face purple. "This is a joke," he roared. Lila's scream cut through the noise, and Vanessa burst into tears, though her eyes were dry. Guests whispered, shocked, as cameras flashed. Elias stood frozen, Jamie's hand on his arm, the only thing keeping him upright. Arthur raised a hand for silence. "Elias has proven his love for this place," he said. "Unlike some, who see only dollar signs." Preston stormed toward Elias, his fists clenched. "You tricked him, you freak." He spat. Jamie stepped between them, his voice calm but firm. "Back off, Preston." The room watched, breathless, as security escorted Preston out. Lila followed, her eyes promising revenge. Vanessa lingered, her gaze unreadable, before slipping away. After the chaos, Arthur pulled Elias aside. "They'll fight this," he warned. "They've got lawyers, money, and no morals. Be careful." Elias nodded, his mind spinning. He wasn't ready for Thesa Castle, a fortune, a war. But Arthur's trust, and Jamie's quiet strength, gave him courage. That evening, the castle felt different, like it was holding its breath. Elias and Jamie sat in the kitchen, the silence heavy. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jamie asked, hurt flickering in his eyes. Elias took a deep breath. "I was scared," he said. "Scared I'd lose you if they came after me." Jamie's expression softened. "You won't lose me," he said, and they kissed, slow and certain, sealing a bond stronger than any inheritance. But the peace was short-lived. A lawyer's letter arrived that night, accusing Elias of fraud and demanding a will contest. The Whitmores weren't giving up. Elias clutched the letter, his resolve hardening. Willow Ridge was his now, and he'd fight for it for Arthur, for Jamie, for himself. The weeks after the announcement were a battlefield. The Whitmores' lawyers flooded Elias with lawsuits, claiming coercion, mental instability, anything to discredit Arthur's will. Elias, once invisible, was now the center of a media storm, His face splashed across tabloids. Gay gardener steals castle. The headline stung, but he refused to hide. Willow Ridge was his, and he'd fight for it. Jamie became his rock, cooking late-night meals and reading legal documents by his side. Their love grew in the chaos, each touch a defiance of the world's cruelty. But the Whitmores played dirty. One night, Elias found his greenhouse vandalized, roses shredded, the word freak scrawled in paint. He sank to his knees, tears falling, until Jamie pulled him up. "They can't break you," Jamie said, his voice fierce. "Not while I'm here." Arthur's health deteriorated, his coughs echoing through the castle. Elias visited him daily, their talks a mix of strategy and stories of the past. "You're stronger than I ever was," Arthur told him one evening, his hand frail in Elias's. "Don't let them win." When Arthur passed that night, Elias wept not just for the man, but for the legacy he'd entrusted to him. The funeral was a spectacle, the Whitmores playing the grieving family for the cameras. Elias stood apart, Jamie at his side, ignoring their glares. The will's final reading loomed, the last hurdle to secure Willow Ridge. The Whitmores had one final card, a forged letter claiming Arthur had changed his mind. Elias's lawyer, a sharp woman named Clara, dismantled it in court, proving it a fake. Preston's face crumpled as the judge ruled in Elias's favor. Willow Ridge was his, irrevocably. The victory was bittersweet. The castle felt empty without Arthur, but Elias vowed to honor him. He and Jamie transformed Willow Ridge into a Havana community center for queer youth, its gardens a symbol of resilience. The Whitmores faded, their influence crumbling without the castle's wealth. Preston moved to the city. Lila chased fame in L.A., and Vanessa disappeared, her schemes forgotten. On a spring morning, Elias and Jamie stood in the rose garden, now blooming brighter than ever. "We did it," Elias said, his voice thick with emotion. Jamie smiled, pulling him close. "No, you did it. I just got to love you through it." They kissed under the oaks, the castle standing proud behind them. Willow Ridge wasn't just a place, it was their home, their love, their triumph. And Elias, once mocked, was now its heart, proving that even the smallest seed could grow into something unbreakable.